November 10th, 2024, 2:17 a.m. Philippine Standard Time. Satellite imagery from Hamawari 9 captured something meteorologists had been tracking with growing alarm for 3 days. A perfectly symmetrical eye, 45 kilometers across, surrounded by towering convective bands extending 700 kilometers from the center. Super Typhoon Pepito had intensified to Category 5 equivalent, with sustained winds reaching 270 kilometers per hour. And it was moving west at 25 kilometers per hour, aimed directly at the Philippine archipelago's eastern seaboard. The conditions that birthed Pepito were textbook perfect for rapid intensification. Sea surface temperatures in the Philippine Sea exceeded 30 degrees Celsius, fuel for the storm's heat engine. Wind shear, which normally tears cyclones apart, had vanished, allowing the system to organize vertically into a towering cylinder of rotation. Warm, moisture-laden air spiraled inward at low levels, rose through the eye wall in explosive convection, then spread outward at altitude in a massive exhaust system. The Typhoon was a heat pump operating at maximum efficiency, extracting energy from the ocean at rates comparable to hundreds of nuclear power plants. By November 10th at 5 a.m., the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration (PAGASA) faced a forecast that offered no good outcomes. Computer models agreed: landfall on Luzon's Baikal region within 18 hours. Coastal storm surge could exceed 5 meters. Rainfall totals might reach 500 millimeters in mountainous terrain. Wind damage would be catastrophic across a swath 200 kilometers wide. Population at risk, over 3 million. Time to evacuate, shrinking by the minute. The Philippines endures an average of 20 tropical cyclones annually, more than any other nation. This relentless exposure has forged one of the world's most sophisticated disaster response systems. After Super Typhoon Haiyan killed over 6,000 people in 2013, the nation rebuilt its emergency architecture from foundation to apex: community-based early warning systems, mandatory evacuation protocols, hardened evacuation centers, pre-positioned relief supplies, and a culture of preparedness embedded in schools and neighborhoods. The monitoring network rivals any on Earth. PAGASA operates Doppler weather radars at 16 strategic locations, providing real-time precipitation and wind data. Automated weather stations dot coastlines, transmitting sea level pressure and wind speeds every 10 minutes. Satellite ground stations receive imagery from Japanese, American, and European spacecraft. Storm surge models run continuously, fed by bathymetric data and historical tide patterns. The technology is world-class, but technology cannot evacuate people who have nowhere to go or who refuse to leave homes they've spent lifetimes building. In coastal barangays villages across Baikal, local officials faced impossible arithmetic. Evacuation centers built to hold 2,000 might need to shelter 5,000. Families with elderly members or infants faced treacherous journeys to safety. Fishermen whose boats represented their entire livelihoods hesitated to leave them behind. And embedded in every decision, the memory of false alarms, storms that weakened before landfall, evacuations that disrupted lives for threats that never materialized. The challenge wasn't just predicting the storm, it was convincing people to act on that prediction. November 10th, 11 a.m. with Pepito 700 kilometers offshore but closing fast, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council issued mandatory evacuation orders for 18 provinces. Police and military vehicles deployed to coastal barangays, loudspeakers announcing the danger in Tagalog, Bicolano, and other regional languages. This is not a drill. Super Typhoon Pepito will make landfall tonight. Storm surge may reach the heights of a 2-story building. Evacuate now. The message, repeated in urgent tones, echoed through streets already showing early signs of the storm: rising swells, darkening skies, wind beginning to gust. The exodus began. Tens of thousands moved inland, away from the coast, toward evacuation centers positioned on high ground or in reinforced school buildings. Extended families crammed into single vehicles. Those without transportation walked, children on shoulders, belongings in plastic bags. Elderly residents, some bedridden, were carried by neighbors. Livestock were left behind, a heartbreaking but necessary choice. Pets too. The scenes played out with grim efficiency born of experience. This was not the first super typhoon, and everyone knew it would not be the last. Not everyone left. In some coastal areas, 15 to 20% of residents refused evacuation orders. Reasons varied: protecting property from looting, caring for animals, physical inability to reach shelters, or fatalism, a belief that fate determines survival, not evacuation. Authorities documented names and locations, a grim registry for post-storm search and rescue. Emergency responders couldn't force people to leave, only inform them of the consequences. Some would survive their decision, others would not. November 10th, 8:47 p.m. Super Typhoon Pepito's eye made landfall near Varak Catanduanes Island. The eye wall, a vertical cylinder of the most violent winds on Earth, swept across the small island at 250 kilometers per hour. Satellite imagery showed the storm's structure compressing against the landmass, convective towers exceeding 15 kilometers in altitude, and lightning strobing through the clouds at rates of hundreds of flashes per minute. On the ground, the experience was apocalyptic. Wind-driven rain became horizontal, erasing visibility beyond arm's length. Metal roofing peeled away from structures like paper. Palm trees bent perpendicular to the ground, some snapping, others surviving through flexibility earned over centuries of typhoon exposure. Power lines failed system-wide within minutes. The roar described by survivors as sounding like jet engines mixed with freight trains was so overwhelming that people in shelters couldn't hear each other shout. And then the storm surge arrived. Storm surge is not a wave. It's a dome of water pushed ahead of the typhoon's winds, rising higher as it encounters shallowing coastlines. Pepito's surge reached 4.8 meters at peak, inundating coastal villages to second-story levels. Seawater rushed inland up to 2 kilometers in low-lying areas, carrying debris, boats, vehicles, anything not anchored to bedrock. Videos captured in the aftermath showed the high water mark, mud lines on buildings, destroyed first floors, and fishing boats deposited in rice fields hundreds of meters from shore. To understand Pepito's power, you must understand tropical cyclones as thermodynamic engines. Warm ocean water evaporates, carrying latent heat. Air rises in towering cumulonimbus clouds, condensation releasing that heat, warming the atmosphere. This warming creates low pressure at the surface. Pressure gradient forces air to spiral inward. Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation causes the spiral to spin, forming the characteristic cyclonic rotation. As long as the storm remains over warm water and experiences low wind shear, the cycle self-reinforces, intensifying until atmospheric limits are reached. Pepito reached maximum intensity because conditions were ideal. Ocean heat content extended to depth, not just the surface, meaning wave mixing couldn't cool the water enough to starve the storm. Upper-level outflow was unobstructed, allowing the exhaust system to efficiently remove rising air. The storm achieved what meteorologists call rapid intensification, with pressure dropping and winds increasing at rates exceeding most forecast models. It went from typhoon to super typhoon in under 24 hours, a timescale that challenges evacuation logistics. Super typhoons are not new to the Philippines, but their frequency and average intensity show concerning trends. Studies of the past 40 years indicate the proportion of tropical cyclones reaching Category 4-5 intensity has increased in the Western Pacific. Sea surface temperatures have risen approximately 0.8 Celsius since 1980 in the Philippine Sea. Warmer oceans mean more available energy. Basic thermodynamics suggests stronger storms. While attributing any single typhoon to climate change is scientifically problematic, the statistical trend toward more intense storms aligns with warming predictions. Inside evacuation centers, thousands experienced the typhoon as sound and vibration. Reinforced concrete walls shuddered under wind gusts. Roof panels rattled. Outside, debris impacted with percussive thuds. Families huddled on floor mats, children crying, adults maintaining calm through sheer determination. Emergency lighting casts harsh shadows. The air smelled of wet concrete, sweat, and anxiety. Shelter managers counted heads repeatedly, ensuring nobody had attempted to leave. Communication with the outside world was severed, cell towers down, power out, roads impassable. They were isolated on an island under assault. Community leaders moved through the crowds, checking on elderly and ill evacuees, distributing water and crackers from pre-positioned stocks, offering reassurance despite their own fears. A woman led a group prayer, voices rising in unison, seeking comfort in shared faith. Another corner, teenagers playing cards by flashlight, normalcy maintained through ritual. These scenes repeated across dozens of shelters, humanity adapting, enduring, refusing to be broken by wind and water. The Filipino concept of bayanihan, communal unity and cooperation, wasn't abstract here, it was a survival strategy. Pepito's eye wall took 4 hours to cross the immediate landfall area. 4 hours of maximum intensity winds. For those experiencing it, time is distorted, minutes felt like hours. Every structural noise suggested imminent failure. But the buildings held testament to improved building codes, implemented after Haiyan, steel-reinforced concrete, wind-resistant designs, and elevation above surge zones. The engineering worked. When dawn finally broke, the typhoon had passed inland, weakening as it lost its ocean energy source. The shelters, designed to save lives, had done exactly that. November 11th, 6:15 a.m. As Pepito moved west across Luzon, weakening over land but still dangerous, coastal communities emerged to confront devastation. Entire neighborhoods of light frame houses had been obliterated, leaving only concrete foundations, trees stripped of leaves, many snapped at mid-trunk, boats stacked like toys against seawalls, roads blocked by debris fields meters deep, power lines tangled in wreckage, vehicles overturned, some half buried in mud. The scale of destruction followed the familiar pattern: near total loss in extreme exposure zones, decreasing damage moving inland. Yet, amid ruins, signs of resilience. The reinforced evacuation center stood intact. Critical infrastructure designed to Typhoon standards, hospitals, government buildings, and newer schools had survived with repairable damage, and most importantly, casualty reports, while still preliminary, suggested that aggressive evacuation and shelter protocols had saved thousands of lives. The confirmed death toll stood at 47 by November 11th evening, a tragedy for every family affected, but a number that could have easily been in the thousands without preparedness measures. Search and rescue teams from the Philippine Coast Guard, armed forces, and volunteer organizations deployed immediately. They moved through flooded areas in rubber boats, checking structures marked on the refusal to evacuate registry. Some residents were found alive, stranded on roofs or upper floors awaiting rescue. Others were not as fortunate. Each rescue was documented, each loss recorded. By midday, helicopter assets from military and international partners began arriving, expanding search capacity and evacuating critically injured to functional hospitals. Within 24 hours of landfall, the humanitarian response was mobilized. Pre-positioned relief supplies, rice, canned goods, bottled water, tarpaulins, and blankets were distributed through barangay distribution points. Military logistics units opened blocked roads using heavy equipment. Power restoration crews prioritized hospitals and evacuation centers. Water tankers supplied potable water to areas where supplies were contaminated by flooding. The Philippine Red Cross established mobile medical clinics treating injuries, infections, and stress-related conditions. But immediate relief, while critical, represents only the first phase. Recovery from Super Typhoon Pepito will take years. Homes must be rebuilt, infrastructure repaired, fishing fleets replaced, agricultural lands rehabilitated from saltwater intrusion, livelihoods restored. The economic impact, estimated at over 15 billion pesos in the Bicol region alone, will strain national and regional budgets. International aid will be essential. And lurking in every recovery plan, the knowledge that another typhoon will come, possibly within months. The post-Pepito reconstruction presents an opportunity that disasters paradoxically offer: building back stronger. Structures can be rebuilt to higher wind-resistant standards, coastal communities can be partially relocated to less exposed areas, mangrove forests, natural storm surge barriers destroyed by development, can be replanted. Early warning systems can be enhanced based on lessons learned. The challenge is implementing these improvements while populations are desperate to return to normalcy and government resources are stretched. Despite the devastation, Typhoon Pepito validated many elements of the Philippines' disaster response system. Early forecasting was accurate, providing sufficient warning time. Evacuation orders were issued decisively. Transportation was coordinated. Shelters were adequately stocked and structurally sound. Communication, while imperfect, reached the majority of at-risk populations. International partnerships facilitated rapid resource deployment. The system, built on painful lessons from previous disasters, functioned largely as designed. Meteorological forecasting deserves specific recognition. Pagas's intensity and track predictions were remarkably accurate, with landfall location within 50 kilometers of the forecast issued 36 hours prior. This accuracy reflects improvements in satellite technology, numerical weather prediction models, and meteorological expertise. When forecasts are reliable, communities can trust warnings and act accordingly. Trust earned through consistent accuracy saves lives. Challenges remain. Communication to remote barangays proved difficult despite multiple dissemination channels. Some communities received warnings too late or didn't fully comprehend the surge danger. Evacuation center capacity remains insufficient in some provinces. Post-disaster logistics, while improved, still struggled with last-mile delivery to isolated areas. Mental health support for survivors, a critical need recognized after Haiyan, remains under-resourced. Each storm reveals gaps that subsequent planning must address. To understand the Philippines' relationship with typhoons requires understanding that these storms are not anomalies. They are part of the nation's ecological and cultural reality. For millennia, typhoons have struck these islands, shaping everything from traditional architecture, houses designed to flex and shed wind, to agricultural practices, planting calendars, accounting for storm seasons, to social structures, communities bonded through shared disaster response. Resilience is not a buzzword here. It's a survival strategy encoded across generations. Yet resilience has limits. Climate projections suggest increasing typhoon intensity in the coming decades. Sea level rise will amplify storm surge impacts. Coastal populations continue growing, placing more people in harm's way. The Philippines faces a future of escalating storm risks without the economic resources of wealthier nations. The international community has responsibilities here, both in reducing emissions that drive climate change and in supporting adaptation financing for nations bearing disproportionate impacts from a problem they didn't create. Meet Rosa Mendoza, 63, who lost her home in Pepito, but not her family. "We survived because we evacuated," she says, sitting in the ruins of her kitchen. "Everything here can be rebuilt. My grandchildren cannot." Her pragmatism, shared by countless others, reflects a perspective forged by repeated exposure to disaster. Material loss, while painful, is secondary to life preservation. This hierarchy of values, where possessions are recognized as replaceable and people as irreplaceable, informs decisions that save lives. For younger Filipinos, typhoons are normalized in ways outsiders find difficult to comprehend. 10-year-old Miguel had evacuated from 3 typhoons by the time he was 8. He knows the warning signs: darkening skies, rising wind, announcements from vehicles. He knows what to pack: documents, water, and clothes in plastic. He knows where to go: the town's evacuation center, which he can navigate blindfolded. This is not childhood shaped by fear, but by practical preparedness. Resilience begins with education, and education begins young. Super Typhoon Pepito will not be the last super typhoon to strike the Philippines in 2024. The season extends through December. The nation will face more storms, possibly several more. Each will test the systems improved after Haiyan, refined after Mangkut, and adapted after Gani. Each will save lives through preparedness and claim lives through the inevitable limitations of warning systems and human behavior. This is the reality of living in one of Earth's most disaster-exposed regions: constant vigilance, repeated trials, resilience as a lifestyle. Super Typhoon Pepito struck the Philippines with devastating force on November 10th, 11th, 2024. Sustained winds reached 270 kilometers per hour. Storm surge exceeded 4 meters. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. Infrastructure damage reached billions of pesos. Lives were lost. Yet the vast majority of those in the storm's path survived, a testament to forecasting accuracy, evacuation effectiveness, and structural improvements implemented over the past decade. The story is neither purely tragic nor triumphant. It's complicated, as disasters always are. The Philippines will rebuild, communities will recover, and when the next typhoon forms in the Pacific, the nation will watch, prepare, evacuate, endure, and recover again. This cycle, repeated annually for generations, defines a particular kind of courage, not the courage to face danger once, but to face it repeatedly, knowing it will return, and choosing to remain nonetheless. This documentary treats typhoon disasters through the lens of resilience rather than catastrophe. While not minimizing devastation, the focus remains on human and systemic responses that save lives. The tone balances sobriety with hope, acknowledging tragedy while honoring survival.